Let us prepare ourselves. So you put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. Now you put your hand over your heart and just extend your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that you have the power to change your experience of the conditions of your life. You have the power to change the experience of the conditions of your life. And if you use that power in the way that it was intended, in the way that it was installed in us, in a way that puts you in great connection with Great Spirit, if you use that power that way, you can actually change the conditions, not just the experience of the conditions of your life, but you can change the conditions themselves. Might seem like a miracle, but it's not really a miracle at all. It's what Brenda calls the science. It's the science. You know, we call this philosophy the science of mind, science of divine mind. It's the science, the repeatable, provable science of how Creator works. It's the science. But in order to do that, we have to begin to learn how to use the power. Well, today I'm borrowing from the sacred text called Success Principles by Jack Canfield. And he wants us to understand a principle. And the principle is this. It's actually a spiritual principle in a business suit. But don't make a mistake. It is a spiritual principle. And that spiritual principle is the event plus your response equals your outcome. Can we put that up there? The event plus response equals the outcome that you want in your life. See, at first blush, it can look like things happen to us. Cancer happens to us. Car accidents happen to us. Downsizing happens to us. We start out with a mate that looks one way and they look another way very shortly after that. That can look like it happens to us. But here's what successful people understand. Successful people understand. Whether you're success in your marriage, in your parenting, in business, in a project, in whatever, successful people understand this principle, that the event plus your response will equal your outcome. So if you came to church this morning with something that's shaky in your life, maybe a relationship that's a little bit shaky in your life. If you came to church this morning with a project that is stuck, you feel like you can't get it moving again. You're not sure whether you're procrastinating or whatever, but something's stuck on your project. Or maybe you came to church this morning because your kids aren't doing as well as you had hoped and prayed that they would be able to do. Whatever it is, let's use this idea that the event plus your response can change the outcome. So the first thing that Canfield invites us to do is this. Take 100% responsibility for your life starting right now. 100%. Not 99%, not 89%, but 100% responsibility for your life right from this moment on. No blaming. Now, a couple weeks ago, we talked about no complaining. I hope you're doing all well with that. God, that's great, huh? That's some great stuff. All right. Now we're going to up the ante. We're going to get a little tougher on ourselves. We're going to let go of victim consciousness starting right now. No victim consciousness. We're going to recognize that we are 100% responsibility for our lives, and we know we're equipped to do that. We're equipped to take 100% responsibility for our life because we have the greatest power in the universe inside of us. It is the power of God. It is the power of Allah. It is the power of Elohim. It is the power of Great Spirit, of the sacred grandmother tree. It is the great power that is within us. And that enables us to be able to do what we need to do to take 100% responsibility for our life. But we have to set the intention today. We have to say, today I sit at the desk where the buck stops here. Not at the desk where the buck starts speeding up here, but the desk where the buck stops right here. So how do we do that? We do that by putting an end to blaming. No more blaming. None zip. Every moment that we use to blame another person or another situation, every moment that we use to blame the economy, the weather, Obama's website, every moment that we use to blame our mate, to blame our weight, to blame our age, to blame anything or anybody, we simply make ourselves sicker. We make ourselves sicker and less successful in our life. And I mean the little things. You know, the condition of the greens. Okay, no blaming. It's just how they look. Right there how they are. Nothing. What we need to do is pay attention to your language. How many times do you say, and we don't usually say, I blame that person. We're too sophisticated. By the time we get to a church like this, we say, if they would have. That's our blame. If they would only have. Or if they only would do. That's the way that we blame. Watch our language. We have to watch who we hang out with. When we hang out with people with victim consciousness, it's very hard for us not to slip into that limited thinking about ourselves. Not to slip into, if somebody else would do something right, we'd be better. No blaming. Not even a little bit of blaming. Taking 100% responsibility for our lives. Many of you remember, whether you're Christian or Hindu or Jewish or whatever, you know that Jesus walked on water. You've heard that. You've read cartoons about it. You've seen it somewhere. You know that Jesus walked, the Bible says anyway. We don't know whether he did or not, but it doesn't really matter to us because it's a story. So we know that Jesus walked on water. Okay? And we also know from the Bible that Peter wanted to do it too. And he said, Jesus, I want to walk on water. And Jesus said, well, get out of the boat first. First, you got to get out of the boat. So Peter does because he has faith. And so he takes his step out of the boat, and the moment his little feet hit the water, the disciples start to get nervous. The event is Peter getting out of the boat. The response of the disciples is nervousness, and Peter catches it, and he starts to sink. See, nervousness, that speech of nervousness is a dialect. That we who are attuned to that dialect, we hear it. You know what dialects, they're regional. You know, if you go to New York, sometimes you're talking to people from New York, you know they're speaking English, you know they are. But you have no idea what they're saying. Or I went to Louisiana once and I had no idea what those people were talking about, none at all, because of the dialect, see? Well, nervousness is a dialect. And Jesus wasn't hearing the dialect. Now, I don't know whether he never went to the region of dialect. Maybe he did. Maybe Mary and Joseph spoke nervousness sometimes and he caught it. It's very hard to be a parent and not instill the nervous dialect into your child. Because when they're doing something that we deem is not going to be successful, we talk to them right away. Be careful. Don't do that. Watch out. That starts our nervous dialect understanding. But whether Jesus went there or not, we can unlearn that dialect just like he did. Maybe he never knew it in the first place. Maybe he heard it and he had to reteach himself. But we can reteach ourselves. You know, our parents speak stuff that we don't speak anymore. Some of our parents spoke in really racist ways, and we don't do that anymore. Some of our parents spoke in really homophobic ways, and we don't do that anymore. Some of our parents spoke in really ageist ways, and we don't do that anymore because we've taught ourselves not to do that. We can teach ourselves not to talk, speak, and listen to the nervous dialect, but it's a spiritual practice, and we have to be about that practice. You know, very often the people who speak that love us the most. And so it's hard for us to separate out that nervous dialect. You know, we have to really pay attention to what happened to Peter. He was not successful. Once he invited the consciousness of nervousness into his mind, he was no longer successful. I could preach on this passage for a month because there's so much in here for us. You know, the truth is, you and I don't not start anymore. We start stuff. We've been coming to churches like this long enough that we know that we have to we have to at least start. We have to get out of the boat. And most of us are out of the boat now. But unfortunately, once we get out of the boat, we allow that conversation to get into our consciousness, and it makes our steps smaller, if not stuck. And our work is to begin to work with ourselves to not do that. We know that the obstacles that come up from us, that the people are saying, watch out, be careful, that was okay then, but now we've changed. We know enough about spirit and how the science, as Brenda would say, we know enough about how the science works. The science works in a way that we have to get out there and begin it and start it with our intention. The science says if you have red flags that come up, they're simply healing flags. If you have mistakes on your journey that come up, we're not afraid of them. We simply know they're healing obstacles for us to get past. We know that if they're an event, and if we change our response to that event, we will change our outcome. In fact, if you work with this principle enough, you begin to welcome the problems because you know they're just a call for you to change, they're events for you to change your response so the outcome can be different. That's a great thing. That's a fabulous thing in our lives. Well, a few minutes ago I said we need to stop blaming other people, and that's true. We do, and things. We also need to stop blaming ourselves. We need to be about the business of stop blaming ourselves. If we could have done better, we would have. In every single situation. If we could have done better, we would have done better. Stop blaming your past screw-ups. Your past screw-ups got you exactly where you are here today. We need to stop blaming ourselves. So here's a bonus spiritual practice I'm going to give you today in order to stop blaming. And that is to begin to say to yourself, I'm going to let go of what other people think of me. So turn to a neighbor and say, what you think of me is none of my business. Now, if you're sitting next to your mother, hello, talking. If you're sitting next to your mother or your father, you see me after about that. We'll talk about it further. But otherwise, what anybody thinks of you is none of your business. And if you want to take 100% responsibility for yourself, you can stop going around trying to get people to love you. You can stop. See? here is the truth. When you show up in your authentic way, people will love you. You don't have to do all that stuff to make them love you. They will simply love you for who you are in your life. You won't have to prove anything. You know, the really successful people in here, they know that. They know that sometimes you have to look like you're not even a very loving person. Sometimes you have to look like you're kind of a crazy person in order to be able to really understand this concept of taking 100% responsibility for your life. We've had parents in the church who have had to place their teens in group homes for a few minutes in order for them to work out the family dynamics. And nobody was cheering them on for doing that. It was a very difficult, painful decision. And there were plenty of people around to tell them they were crazy. There were plenty of people around to tell them they were bad parents. There are plenty of people around to tell them all kinds of things. But they said, what you think of me is none of my business. My child is what is important here. And that's where I'm going to keep my focus, because I want to be successful. So I see this event of this child who's not doing well. I'm going to change my response, and I'm going to get a different outcome. And finally, the condition in both of these families have changed beautifully. We can't always look, sometimes we just look crazy. There are gay people in here who thought they were straight, and there were straight people in here who thought they were gay. And when they made whatever switch they were making at the time they were making it, they looked totally crazy. There are people in this church who have left good pensions 2 years before they got that pension because they couldn't walk in that door one more day. Not one more day. And they understood. They understood that what they had to do is look a little crazy. Turn to a neighbor and say, I'm a sugar. Come on, I'm a sugar. Okay, so our goal, Meshuggah simply means a little crazy. You're a little crazy, okay? So our goal is to be a little more Meshuggah tomorrow than we were today. Huh?
Thank you for remembering us.
Yes, I do remember you over here. I do. It's just harder for the camera and our people over and wherever else they are. So I want to finish this by saying this. Here is the thing. Taking 100% responsibility for ourselves takes time, and it takes a change in consciousness. It takes stop blaming everybody else. And we say in recovery, we tell the newcomers, don't give up before the miracle. Because if you stay with this spiritual principle, your life will change. But it's God's time. Depending on how much you got up in there, that's a little meshugana, a little wrong. See, I had to make some changes in my life in order to do that. I can't blame society anymore. Look, there are plenty of things out there that people say about me that are plain wrong. I have to say, I don't care. What do I think about me today? You know, when we had this church, those of you who are visiting this beautiful facility, a couple of years, not so long ago, we had a church in a really funky little old restaurant, nasty old little restaurant, for which I'm very grateful, by the way. But it was a mess. It was a mess. It was stuck between two adult experience motels. It was just, the whole thing was, there wasn't anything that wasn't a mess about it. It was just a mess, okay? And I talked myself in, and I'm Catholic, so we had little parishes, and they were sweet, and they were cute, and they were nice, and I talked myself into thinking the church would not be successful because of its location and because of its curbside appeal. See? So to speak. So here's the thing. Society may have thought that, but once I stopped thinking it, the church began to have more people in it. There was a time when I thought that I couldn't be a pastor of a large spiritual community because I'm a lesbian and people wouldn't like that. Now let me tell you, there are plenty of people who don't like that. Some of them aren't here anymore. But once I stopped worrying about what they were thinking and started realizing it's about what I think of myself. Now look, there are some of you in this room, in fact, everybody in this room has something like that. I don't know what it is for you. But it's something society may have thought, and you may still be blaming it because you've bought it. You're still thinking it. Maybe it's age, maybe it's size, maybe it's how many years you went to college. Whatever it is. It's a limitation that you have brought into your consciousness that now it's time for you to let go of. Let's take this message into prayer. Knowing that we are always in the presence of the most glorious God, presence of love, the presence of acceptance, the presence of understanding. That's the presence of Great Spirit that lies within each and every one of us, always saying yes to everything, saying yes. So I'm careful what I put my attention to. I put my attention to an end to homelessness today, and Great Spirit is agreeing and saying yes. I put my attention to an end to hunger today, and Great Spirit is saying yes. I put my attention to serenity among all countries, respect of all countries, and Great Spirit is saying yes. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.